Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the Animatrix from 2003. The Animatrix, up until the new Matrix Resurrections, was kind of the only follow-up to the Matrix I ever liked in any real way. Mostly because it seemed like such a cool concept. Having about 9 different animated short films, or 8 really, but about the Matrix, both its background, weird short stories within the Matrix, things that set up Matrix Reloaded, all sorts of kind of like a grab bag of short stories in that universe. And I thought it was a really cool idea at the time. I saw it when I could on Blockbuster or something. I always really liked it. I've seen it a couple times, and it was cool to revisit it actually. And it is a cool concept, getting various different animation directors, getting Sachiro Watanabe, the creator of Cowboy Bebop, to do 2 of them, because why wouldn't you? Getting Peter Chung, getting various different animation directors who I'm sure I'm going to forget somebody's favorite, but all these different styles to talk about different stories within the Matrix and not having them necessarily be about Neo, Trinity, or Morpheus. And I think the results are really cool, and it actually made me wonder more about the Matrix franchise more than the other films that came out at the time. Now, when the Matrix sequels came out, first 2, it was this ambitious project, and which also involved the video game Enter the Matrix, would end with the Matrix Online online game or whatever, and this was an additional part of it. The Wachowskis sort of worked on it, having written the Second Renaissance, which explains how humanity got to this point, which is actually a pretty interesting short. They cut it up into 2 parts, which I'm not sure why, at least on HBO Max, why it is like that. Maybe because it was distributed to various cinemas and various different places, and they felt it would work better as a 2-part thing. Which I don't really get why it's that way on the actual Animatrix on HBO Max. Also, the order of these was different, by the way, on HBO Max from what I read. Specifically, the final flight of the Osiris is last when I saw it on HBO Max. I've seen a lot of people say it's first. I sort of remember that, but I think I'm guessing that did actually play in theaters before. That is also written by the Wachowskis as well as or they gave the story for Second Renaissance. Sorry, they helped write Final Flight of the Osiris, and they also give the story for Kid Story, which I guess the 2 that connect most is Kid Story was the kid who kept friending Neo in Reloaded, and you see him in Revolutions as well. And in this one, in the Kid Story, he's like a kid who he's contacted by Neo, and he's able to sort of get himself out of there without using a pill or anything like that, which is sort of interesting. But you kind of get he could be like a 1 type person as well, but they never really get into that. The Second Renaissance, I think, is really an outstanding one, and it makes you wonder like more about it. It made me also wonder more about the robots, and it's sort of in the machine world and stuff. And it's interesting kind of info dump backstory thing, but they do a really good job. That was directed by Studio 4C, or 4 Celsius, and Mahiro Madia, I think. And that is actually a really cool short. The Final Flight of the Osiris, which is done in more of the kind of Final Fantasy Spirits Within style, and it seems like played more in theaters in America. Some of them played in theaters, like all of them played in theaters, and some theaters would play just the Animatrix and stuff. But this one played before Dreamcatcher in America. It's probably the weakest. It's like too sexual for its own good. It is about a ship that Jada Pinkett Smith mentions in Reloaded. So it directly connects to it. But yeah, it's probably like the worst one. To be honest, I'm glad it was kind of last day. I was way more into these until that one. I was like, yeah. His story is directed by Sachiro Watanabe, who did Cowboy Bebop, the animation style, and that is actually pretty interesting and different from even his own. He has he's the only person who has 2 shorts on here. It's different, and it's a little more sketchier and things like that than the other one, but I quite actually like its different attitude, and it's like a story about a teenager who's disaffected and not into this world and everything. It kind of played into the ideas that teenagers were so into the Matrix and things like that in a way that I thought was interesting. You could maybe not like that as much, but I feel like most of the people who wouldn't like that wouldn't see the Animatrix, so who gives a shit? I liked Program, which was by the Madhouse Studio. That one does feel a little less essential, but at the same time, I've heard people say that about this. I'm like, that's like this is the time where you are less essential. You know what I mean? Like the one that is supposedly the most essential, I don't fucking like. So it doesn't like, I've never understood that. I kind of like it as a quick little short story. That's all. It's like a short film. That's all it needs to be. It was in that world. It shows they could actually build different programs in different eras and stuff because they're in feudal Japan. They're having this cool fight, and she thinks like you won't get out of there, and she can't find an operator. It's this whole training thing. As for what it is, I was like fine with it. It didn't blow me away. I've heard it often mentioned as the weakest one. I think the animation is very good. The kind of story it's telling, it's fine. It's very one and done, but it does its job in my mind. The names are not great, so that's why I was like, is Program the one? No, I got that right. Okay, World Record, which is also by Madhouse, by a different person at Madhouse, Takashi Koike. I like the idea of that because it's basically about a runner who runs and gets a high off running and ends up waking up in his pod as he's being charged and not realizing about the Matrix. That was a cool, I like the idea of the runner's high and the meditative aspect of athleticism that fed into that, as well as the character designs are really kind of strange and weird. I almost thought Peter Chung directed that for some reason. He did not. I liked that idea. It's like a cool short story idea. You know, it doesn't connect to anything, but it's an interesting idea of like what could break you out of the Matrix, which I think it explores well with this and Kid's story earlier. I think this was second. God, I don't even know what the order is because I've seen so many different orders of the fucking Animatrix, but whatever. I did see it all apparently in some strange order, but that was an interesting one. I think you kind of get more into the animation in that one. You have Detective Story, which is another one by Shihiro Watanabe. I like Detective Story the most. Trinity's involved in that one. Neo shows up in a Kid's story, but Trinity is in that. It's a detective kind of in a 40s style looking, trying to get Trinity. It kind of almost makes me think Trinity is older than we're letting on or something, but it doesn't really get into that. It just is like a kind of cool 40s fantasy, and then we're out. But, you know, having the creator of Cowboy Bebop make a noir-ish detective story is totally cool with me. I might be my favorite overall. And then this was at least second last when I saw it, called Matriculated by Peter Chung, about a group of humans who then kind of kidnap a robot and kind of sort of change its mind and explain to it human emotions, which that one actually goes more into the mythos, into even resurrection. So that's actually sort of more of a theory connection, less of a plot and continuity connection. And all of this, according to the Wachowskis, is canon. I know other things have done this. Star Wars Visions recently did this as a series. It probably works better as a series than like a pseudo heavy metal movie sort of thing. But what I liked about it at the time and even now is its willingness, and I think other people have done this. I think there was a Batman one, maybe, I forget, and I think more movies should, because it's such a cool concept. Like, let other animators have fun with it. It can be in different styles, different attitudes, different theories, different motivations, and you get to play around with iconography. And if there's like a story that like doesn't get explored in the movie, you can just like have it in there for the fans or whatever. It actually did do well. It made about 60 million. It actually sold about over 2 million copies of it, and apparently made a lot on rental. I read in one place, but it made a significant amount for a home video release at the time. I don't know how much anime was making then, if you know, or something like that. But The Matrix was really hot. This came out, at least in America, right after Reloaded, and people still sort of liked The Matrix. That ended towards the end of the year, but they liked it then. And so I think people were a little more interested in going to that. I think anime was pretty mainstream at the time, but it's cool, the Wachowskis, to lean their franchise into this and go on a more animated route. I like that they opened the door to something then that like even Star Wars Visions was do and other people do, but this is one that always stuck out to me because it's the one bit of Matrix lore and Matrix ideas that were disconnected from it that I wanted to explore multiple times. Even so that when I bring it up to people who've seen it, there was like, oh, that was cool. Like, almost everyone who remembers had pleasant memories of it because it was so different. And you're like, you think more about what is the world of the Matrix and what is this larger world. And even like after it, I was questioning things like when I watched the second Renaissance, they explore so well, like the robots and what led to the revolution, and that what led to the Matrix, and how they needed energy because the humans blacked out the sun, which was a terrible idea on the humans' part. That's a little unbelievable, but I guess we have to go with that. The idea that like I was like, yeah, but what are they actually powering? Because they blacked out the sun. Like, I was more thinking of the ideas in that than I thought of any of the sequels. It really let them kind of play, because you're not playing with the traditional narrative. You don't have to. If you did the second Renaissance at the beginning of Matrix 2, it would probably be better, but it wouldn't make any fucking sense. And I think letting off the chains and constraints of narrative and playing around more is sometimes fun to watch as a viewer, and I quite like watching as a viewer. I really wish, like, even the MCU or Ghostbusters or any big franchise would do things like this, because to me it's fun. I think part of animation is that anything can happen, and it felt like in the first Matrix there's this whole deeper world to go into. And although when you got that in the live action sequels, I didn't really like that very much, in the Animatrix I felt that spirit in it, and I feel that spirit while watching it again. I was thinking about more of the ideas from that when I went into Resurrections than I was with the sequels, because it has different ideas. It has different people coming towards it. And I think it was one of the smartest ideas the Wachowskis had with this franchise, was opening things up. And this opened things up more to me than any of the other films did. Maybe sort of Resurrections, but not as much as this. I always find it really promising and interesting, and I've always had pleasant memories of it. I don't think every one of them works, but I think the second Renaissance does. I think it's Detective Story. I think Matriculated, not my favorite, but brings up a lot of good ideas. Kid Story as well, I would put in there. But the rest are decent. The only one I don't like is Final Flight of the Osiris. The rest, I think, are fairly great animated shorts, and it's the only one that doesn't age well as well. So I think, everyone, you talk about the Matrix, you talk about you're introduced to this world, these concepts, these things, like the whole idea that the world would be a simulation, that you could change your identity, change, through this, change who you are, be uploaded with all this information, all these things. And that idea of imagination and feeling like you've never seen something before, I think leans itself more towards animation than it did in live action in the first place. And although they did that in the first film, I think this is maybe, to me, one of the better, if not the best, follow-up to the Matrix, because it embodied that spirit more than any of the rest of them could, because it was able to play more than I think any of the others could even imagine. But maybe this is just me being pro animation, and you all know that and stuff, but I think it's also because the stories and the ideas were here. And when I walk away from this, I remember the animation, I remember the stories, and I remember thinking how open and strange and weird and different and huge the Matrix is. And I'm not just thinking about Neo. And I think opening up the Matrix with the Animatrix might be one of the better ideas the Wachowskis and Warner Brothers and everyone ever had with the Matrix. So if you've seen the Animatrix and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.